Welcome to episode 25 of the Ride and Inspire Rockcast. I'm Roxy, and today I'm taking you on a creativity walk in Austria. I'm again in a suburban area today because I didn't find a forest to record this, and I really wanted to talk about this topic today, which is a recipe, an easy recipe you can follow to learn motor skills, so to learn movements. This could be mountain biking skills, but also any other motor skill. And I want to give you an easy recipe because I think most people have a wrong idea of how learning skills works. And if you have a wrong idea, you're just going to frustrate yourself, you're going to endanger yourself, and of course you're not going to learn as efficiently. In case you're new to this podcast, my name is Roxy. I've been a full-time coach for many years. I train and certify other instructors for the BICP, the Bike Instructor Certification Program, and also for my own company, which is called Roxy Bike. So I train other trainers, but I also work with riders of all levels all over the world, both in person and with my home training courses with an online learning platform. And over the years, I've seen so much progress, but I've also seen many people stagnate. So I've seen many people hit a plateau. And the last few weeks, the last 7 weeks, I've coached over 300 riders in person. And I also saw some people, let's call it traits and beliefs that have limited these people to progress. And I've seen some traits and some beliefs that have helped people to progress. And from all this experience, I've now come up with a recipe, or actually this recipe is something that I've been using for many years, but I'd like to share it with you today because this recipe can really help you to make progress faster, and also it can keep you from being disappointed because you won't have false expectations. I've also worked with a lot of fearful riders the last weeks. I generally specialize on fearful riders because I'm also a psychological counselor and I'm a fear coach and a graduate mental trainer. So I really know how the brain works and how fears arise and how you can ease fears. But one thing I need to say is that most fearful riders are fearful for a good reason. So they are sensing that something is off, and usually it's because they did not follow the recipe that I'm giving you today. It's because they have false expectations of themselves and also of what learning motor skills actually looks like. And then they expect these motor skills to be there, so they expect to be able to perform a specific skill. Then it doesn't work. Then they think it's just because they're fearful, but actually the fear comes because their body is sensing that they don't have the skill yet. And that's why I want to address this, because I do believe that most of my fearful listeners may be fearful due to this misunderstanding that they think, oh, they already have the skill. And maybe if you now listen to this recipe, you'll see why that is the case. All right, let's get to the recipe to learn any motor skill out there in the world. Step 1 is understanding which skills make up the desired end result. Often, especially when it comes to mountain biking, the desired end result is a combination of several skills. So for example, if you want to ride technical trails safely, let's say it's a technical, steep, rooty trail, and you want to ride this trail safely, then usually it's not just one skill that you need, it's a combination of skills. Or if you want to learn the bunny hop, then it's not just the bunny hop, but actually it's a few separate movements that once blended together that make up the bunny hop. And the first step is understanding which skills you need and then deconstructing the final move and analyzing the individual skills. Let me come back to the example I just used before, the technical steep section. What you, for example, need for this is you need an excellent body positioning, you need excellent speed control, so braking skills, you need the ability to separate the bike from the body, so you need to be able to ride roll downs, allowing the bike to move away from you into the steep or into the roll down. You need to be able to ride over obstacles, so absorbing obstacles by using your arms and legs as suspension, and all this boils down to a great body positioning, but also to using your arms arms and legs as your natural suspension to allow the bike to roll over obstacles while maintaining traction, balance, and control. And although this sounds super easy, and although you can understand the concepts behind this super quickly, the next step, so this is step 2 in the recipe, is the crucial one. And this is what most people miss because they think, oh, I've understood it, so now I can just perform it. But the next step is practicing these skills individually to build a general motor pattern for each of these skills. So after having deconstructed the skill in the first step, you now need to practice these skills individually. So you need to isolate them, and by repeatedly practicing them, you will then build a general motor pattern for each of these skills, and only then you can add variation and then combine them, and not earlier. So for example, let's now talk about body positioning. You need to first understand the elements of correct body positioning. Then you need to get out and you need to practice this repeatedly in a safe learning zone. So now, not directly on the trails, but you need to concentrate on the individual elements of body positioning, the feet, the hands, the hips. I have a body positioning breakdown video, which I'm going to link below, because body positioning is not just something that is super easy and super simple, but there's a lot of small pieces to it, and you can't just understand and then apply all these pieces individually out on the trails directly. You need to do this in a safe learning zone where you actually have the capacity to concentrate on the individual elements of this skill. And then by repetition, you will build that general motor pattern that I talked about. And only then you can start adding variation and start adding distractions. Because if you add the distractions too early, then you'll just start to build compensatory habits, which will then in the long run allow you or force you into a plateau, so you won't be able to develop beyond a specific level once you've automatized these compensatory habits. Then comes the next step, which is adding variations. So in step 2, you will be practicing the individual skills all individually in a safe learning zone until you have a general motor pattern. And in step 3 of the recipe, you will then add variation and time constraints. So for example, when we're talking about body positioning or roll downs, you can now add loose terrain, you can add speed variations, you can add more distractions, so start to take it to more difficult trails. And when we're talking about skills like bunny hop, you can now add a timing mark, you can now add a small obstacle to hop over. And before that, you should always, so in step 2, you should always practice in isolated and in safe environments to avoid distraction, to allow your body to really build those general motor patterns cleanly, so to build a clean motor pattern. And then in step 3, you want to add the variation and you want to add the distraction to really allow your brain to consolidate those general motor patterns, to learn to apply them out on the trails. This step, however, step 3, is usually the one people do instead of doing step 2. So most riders think they will just learn by riding out on the trails, and they don't isolate the skills, they don't practice the skills in a safe environment, and they don't focus on a clean execution of the general motor pattern. They just have some motor patterns which are usually let's call a blend of compensatory habits and I would say wild motor patterns that are not clean, but they are more random. And then they take them to the trails and they consolidate them there, which brings a lot of huge variation. And this also brings the danger into the skills once you start riding harder trails, and once you start to make the skill itself harder as well, such as adding gaps to the equation, or adding drops to the equation, or adding a lot of steepness or slipperiness to the equation. That's when the fears start to take over, but the cause of this fear is actually way before. It's because the general motor pattern is just too varied and there is no clean motor pattern for your brain and body to build its motor patterns onto. And then the step 4 of the recipe is repeating this. So then you need to start from the beginning again, deconstruct the skill again, see where you can refine your motor patterns. Then you need to practice these motor patterns individually again under safe conditions in a learning zone. Then you take them, step 3, take them to the trails. So start to apply them in a performance zone, and then you repeat this cycle over and over. So that's the 4-step recipe to learn any motor skill. And the first one is always understanding the individual moves, deconstructing them, and then practicing them in a safe environment. And that's probably the largest misconception out there in the mountain biking world, which interestingly is mainly in the mountain biking world, because you see this being done with golfing, with tennis, with guitar playing, and with any other motor skill. You see that people are applying this recipe, but with mountain biking, people think they just need to ride and they just need to practice on trails, and hardly any riders actually put in the time needed to practice in a safe learning zone, and most of all, to practice clean motor patterns. Because here's the big deal. To practice a clean motor pattern, you need a specific goal at hand, and you want to know how the movement needs to look exactly. Then you'll start practicing it, and then you need to work with feedback. So you need to either video yourself and compare yourself and see if the motor pattern is the same, or you need a professional coach to help you detect those causal errors. Otherwise, you probably will be trying to detect and correct consequential errors. And as long as you haven't refined the causal error, you're not going to develop beyond a specific level. And most of all, you'll be practicing your causal error every time you're out there practicing, because you're repeating it, you're ingraining the errors. And that's why I keep saying the best thing you can do is, when you're starting a new sport, to take some professional coaching straight away, because the motor patterns you build in the beginning are those that are going to be your foundation, and those are going to be consolidated, and refining those later is much, much, much harder than learning them right in the first place. And that's why also many other pro coaches out there I know, and many pro riders that I've worked with, they also say when they start a new sport, the first thing they will do is hire the most expensive coach they can get, because they don't want to be consolidating wrong patterns. And what they have in the beginning, so that foundation they set in the beginning, that's their foundation for everything to come. And if they set a solid and a stable foundation in the beginning, then it's much easier to then build their, let's call it their house of skills higher, if they have a solid foundation. So now I want to share something that I've noticed the last years of coaching. So I've been coaching, as I said, for 14 years, and I've been online coaching for over 4 years now. And the progress my riders make if they combine online coaching with personal coaching is absolutely stunning. I have not seen anything as effective as the combination of online and live coaching. And now here's the thing. You may think that live coaching is the basis and online coaching is kind of complementary, but actually it's the other way around. The biggest part of the training needs to occur online, and then you can refine the movements when you work with someone in person. The hard work, let's call it, and the long-term work, that is most effective when the people do this by themselves at home, because you need to practice over a longer period of time. You need enough sleep in between, and to build the general motor pattern, you just need time and something called spaced repetition. And you can do that by yourself on your doorstep, as long as you have a clear goal at hand and as long as you're getting feedback. And that's why my online coaching always includes personalized feedback with video or via video, that you send me your practice videos and you get personalized feedback, because you need someone to find solutions that work for you. And then to complement this, people can then work with a professional coach in person, where you can then find small details. But small details will not start to matter until the general motor pattern is set. And to set the general motor pattern, you need to practice, as I said, in a safe learning zone over a longer period of time. And you can do this perfectly by yourself if you have a clear set of drills at hand, and if you have a clear goal at hand, and if you're getting feedback either from yourself, if you video yourself and compare yourself, or better, if you're getting feedback from a professional coach. And this does not need to be immediate feedback, delayed feedback. Actually, according to many studies that I'm going to be linking below, according to these studies, actually delayed feedback is more effective for motor learning if you're still building the general motor pattern. So over the years, I've seen that the progress riders make if they follow this recipe and allow themselves enough time, and most of all, practice enough, is absolutely stunning. My oldest client is 84, and he just started to ride a few years ago, and he is really riding some technical stuff. Then I have many riders age 50 and over, age 60 and over, who haven't been riding for a long time, but now they can bunny hop their e-bike, they can jump huge gap jumps, and that's all because they've put in the work. They understood the recipe, which is first understand the skill, deconstruct it, practice in a safe environment, and then start to add the technicality of the trails, then start to add the distraction, and not before. Then refine this and start the cycle all over again. Once you start practicing this recipe and really put in the work off the trails to build those motor patterns, to refine those motor patterns, and then start combining them, then start practicing on trails, that's when you'll start making progress. And if you'd like to do that with me, then check the description below. You'll see that you don't need to be crashing to make progress. You don't need to risk things to improve. You can improve safely right on your doorstep by following a set of drills that are proven to work. But you need to do it. And that's where I think most people are just too lazy. They're like, yeah, I'm just going to ride and I'm just going to have some fun. Of course, but 10% input is 10% output. And if you want to put in more and if you want to get out more, then all you need to do is follow proven drills and put in the work that you need to get out the reward. That's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for staying till the end. Check the description of this podcast if you'd like to support me, and I hope to see you again for my next episode. Goodbye.